I'm coming to you live right now from my basement in the first ever election night conversations and Constitution. I'm Shawn Meintz. I'm a social studies teacher, government teacher, and I just want to spend I don't know how long. I want to start it at 8 so that I could go a little while before I fall asleep. But election night it's an interesting night. I think particularly in 2020, we're all on the edge of our seats. You know, we're in anticipation, or maybe anxiety, depending on where you fall in the political and what happens. But I I watch these election cycles and I watch the news media and sometimes get really frustrated as a government teacher in the way that our government is portrayed and the way that it is communicated to the people. And I'm disappointed in the way that they do that. Such an opportunity with so many people tuned in to really kind of hone in and focus on the way that our government's supposed to operate and take this night out to be a night of really just civic education and learning about our government and the way it's supposed to operate. And I really feel like the media misses an opportunity where they just spend a lot of time speculating about which county is doing what and counting beans. And it's like, you know what, in the big scheme of things, we're going to find out one way or another. It might be tonight. It might be in a few days. It might be in a few weeks. But we will find out. And it will all work out. That will all work out. But what an opportunity we have to talk about the Constitution, what it means, what our government is meant to do, what it's supposed to be. So that is totally my idea. That is the goal of this. I just thought, man, I wish they would do this. I wish they would do this. I wish they would do this. And I decided, it was a while back, I decided I'm not going to watch the news, but always in my mind then I was thinking, well, they should do this, and so that's why I'm here tonight, is to talk about or to do the thing that I thought that they should be doing, and that's just talking about the Constitution. So disclosure up front, I am not going to take a partisan view. I am not going to take I'm not going to make a prediction about who's going to win. We will find that out. That only requires patience. It's like drying the dishes when you could put the dishes on the rack and let the air dry them. I just let them dry. We'll figure it out. Have some patience in the system. Trust in the system. It's worked this long. So let's just figure out what the system is all about and what it's meant to do, how it was designed. So we're really just going to walk through the Constitution. If you're watching this right now, I'm going to be reading from portions of the amendments. I've got my packets here that I use in class to talk about the Constitution and the amendments. So you might, if you really want to get into this, you can pull up a Constitution from the internet. Just Google search U.S. Constitution. You find lots of sources that have those just word for word on there, and you can track what's happening and what I'm talking about to prove that I'm not making it up. I am reading from these packets. I don't think you can see that there. I've typed in my questions and stuff, and you can see those things pop up. But yeah, you can get your Constitution. I think it's something that everybody should know about. I have all of my students in class read through the Constitution. We read, not so much this year since we've got a crazy schedule and everything is super condensed, but we read good portions of it and then talk about what it means and kind of dive into it. And that's what we're going to do tonight. So if you're enjoying what's there, if you're enjoying what you're watching, feel free to share this video. It is live. We're also on YouTube. At the Shawn Meintz channel on YouTube, so you could go back and watch what's happening there. But if you put a comment in, I've got it up on my screen here. I may be able to see that. I don't do live things on Facebook too much, but if you got a question, something you want me to address, you could put that in the comments there, and if I get a chance to, I'll talk about it. But again, I'm not going to speculate on the outcome of elections. I am not a constitutional lawyer. I am not a constitutional scholar beyond the level of high school government teacher. So there may be things that I don't know, and I am doing this all by myself tonight. So that's the way it goes. We are gonna get started right here, and we're going to look at some different things. So the first thing I want to talk about tonight is voting. It's election night. It's something that we get out and we get the opportunity to voice our opinions and to talk about and to vote for the things that we care about. So I'm going to pull up my my document with my outline here on my phone. I want to talk about voting first. I think it's interesting. We have this right to vote, but that right to vote is not found in the Constitution. There is no constitutional U.S. Constitution right to vote for citizens of the United States. That right to vote actually comes from the state level. That's from one of the powers of the states. But what the Constitution does is it will limit the areas that voters can be, I don't want to use disenfranchised, but how voting can be denied or abridged to certain people. We actually do deny certain people the right to vote, and for the most part, we agree with it in some cases. Let me explain before you get too angry with me on that one. But first, let's look at some of the amendments from the Constitution that help us understand the right to vote. There's 4 amendments in the Constitution that help us know what's going on here. Well, there's 5. I got 5. The 15th Amendment is the first one. The 15th Amendment says there is no bar to vote based on race, that the right of citizens to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of race, color, or previous condition of servitude. So this amendment, the 15th Amendment, was ratified in 1870, right after the Civil War. The 13th Amendment frees the slaves. The 14th Amendment gives them citizenship, but more importantly, well, I don't want to say more importantly than giving former slaves citizenship, but kind of as an extension, since that part of the Constitution, that part of the amendment no longer has an effect, since former slaves have those freed people have all passed away. This was 1870. It's almost it's 150 years ago. So understand what I'm saying here. But the other part of it is the equal protection under the law part. So the 14th Amendment was citizenship rights and equal protection under law, and that's what I'm getting at. And that is the 15th Amendment. Then is no bar to vote. That race is no bar to vote. And so we can't deny people the right to vote based on their race. The next amendment in our voting suffrage, it's called suffrage, is women's suffrage, which was ratified in 1920. The 19th Amendment grants women the right to vote. The right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex. There was actually a push for the single word sex to be added to the 15th Amendment, which would have given women the right to vote in 1870. It was actually Wyoming, I do believe, that was the first state to allow women to vote. Again, states grant voting rights, so the states could change their voting rights as long as they don't violate these constitutional amendments that determine why the right to vote shall not be denied or abridged. We've seen in both of our amendments, both the 15th and 19th, that the same wording, that the right of citizens to vote shall not be denied or abridged based on certain elements. So we have a right to vote given at the state level. Women were allowed to vote in Wyoming in the late 1800s. And then by 1920, then all women were allowed to vote. No state could say no, women can't vote. So we have 2 things there with 2 different amendments. Then we'll get to the 23rd Amendment. That one deals with voting rights for the District of Columbia in particular, but we'll get to that one in a second, in a few minutes. But the 24th Amendment, it bars poll taxes, and poll taxes are basically, it was having to pay to vote. Let me read it. The right of citizens of the United States to vote in any primary or other election for president or vice president, for electors for president or vice president, or for senator or representative in Congress shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or any state by reason of failure to pay any poll tax or other tax. So they can't deny a person the right to vote based on whether or not they pay a tax. All right, so you don't have to pay to vote. It's not a pay to vote system. You can vote at any economic level. And then the 26th Amendment is the last one that we'll talk about are a group of people that we don't deny the right to vote to, and that is people 18 years and older. Initially, the voting rights were for men and early on landowning men who were white and over the age of 21. And so here we've lowered the voting age to 18 years in 1971. Historically, this is a result of the Vietnam War. The idea that if you're old enough to die for your country, that you're old enough to vote on whether or not you should be involved in this war and participate in your government that's sending people off to war. So lowered it in 1971 to 18 years. So I said, we do deny the right to vote to certain people. And so we think about this last amendment, the 18-year-olds, anyone younger than 18 is denied the right to vote. Okay, so we don't disagree with this. I don't know that anybody's saying that babies should be allowed to go out and vote. So we deny babies the right to vote. We deny 5-year-olds, 10-year-olds, 17-year-olds the right to vote. And so there is that element of what's happening in our Constitution. The states could change that. I float an idea out there. It's not practical. I don't know how they would do it. I'm sure it would cost too much money. But if a state wanted to lower the voting age to 16 and allow 16-year-olds to be able to vote, particularly in like local elections, school board, city council, states could do that. It's my understanding they could do that. But again, to just have maybe separate ballots for 16-year-olds, but they do separate ballots for primaries. But when presented with this option, Scotland, I believe, had an option to lower the voting age to 15, and it was rejected. So I'm not saying it's a practical option, but the states could have some leeway. They just can't deny anybody over the age of 18 the right to vote. They could grant it to younger people if they thought that was a good idea. So the right to vote is a state function, and then what happens is the federal government protects the right to vote in certain areas. We're going to look real quick now, switching gears. We're going to go from the amendments back to the Constitution, back to the amendments. What I like to do in my class is give an understanding of what the Constitution says, like how it was originally written, and then going and looking at how the amendments changed or modified or clarified some points in the election process or whatever in the Constitution that it changes. So I'm going to be in Article 2. We're going to start in Article 2. That's the election that everybody's caught up in, and people forget oftentimes that we have elections in other parts of the year. Like we'll have another election in April. So I just had a student today tell me he just missed the cutoff to vote. So what's the point of registering to vote? Well, you can register to vote at age 17 and a half. So if you know any kids that are 17 and a half years old, get them registered to vote. And that gives them time to process the paperwork, mail out the voter registration card, and then they can find their polling place. And then for this young man, he said, well, I don't get to vote for another year. Well, at least he knew there were more voting than just every 4 years. But it'll be April when he can vote. So it's not really that far off. And so that the point is, like, we don't vote just once every 4 years in the United States. We have, in this year, 2020, where I live, we had 3 elections. We had an April election, which was postponed, but that April election, and then the August election, the primaries, and now in November. So we get these opportunities to vote. They come up every once in a while, and our turnout is relatively poor in the United States, and that's too bad. I think it's a bit overwhelming of an experience for people. But let's get back to the Constitution. Enough about what I think. That's not about what I think. So to the Constitution, Article 2, Section 1 talks about, all of Article 2 is the executive branch, lays out the powers of the president, the qualifications of the president, and we'll talk about some of those momentarily. But I want to focus on the Electoral College for a second. It's Article 2, Section 1, kind of the second clause. It says, each state shall appoint in such manner the as the legislature thereof may direct, a number of electors equal to the whole number of senators and representatives to which the state may be entitled in the Congress. But no senator or representative or person holding an office or of trust or profit under the United States shall be an elector. So on my chalk wall back here, just a simple math equation. Oh, this might not work. Well, hopefully the numbers are the right way. So the whole number of senators, and we know that the whole number of senators in each state is 2 senators. And then it's plus the number of representatives, and that equals the number of electors. Okay, so a little math here. Now, we know that there are 2 senators per state, and we know that there are 435 representatives in the House of Representatives. So for our country, we have 100 senators plus 435 representatives. Pretty simple math problem, equals 538 Electoral College votes. And you may be thinking, well, this guy's math is off. It is off. But the 23rd Amendment that we skipped just a second ago gives 3 Electoral College votes to Washington, D.C. See, Washington, D.C. is made out of 2 parts of a state. That's at the end of Article 1. So it's not actually a part of Article 1, Section 8. So to exercise it, the Congress has the power to exercise exclusive legislation in all cases whatsoever over such district not exceeding 10 miles square as may by cession of particular states and by the acceptance of Congress become the seat of government of the United States. So this by the cession of states. The states actually gave up land along the Potomac River to allow the capital of our country to not exist in a state, because whoever had the capital would be like all lording it over people, like, well, we've got the capital, so we're the best. But that's so they just separated it out altogether. But it took until let me check my dates on the 23rd Amendment, 1961, to get the people who live in Washington, D.C. Any say in the government that is over them. They're not in a state, so they don't have senators. They're not in a state, so they don't have representatives. Their court system is a district court of the federal court system. It's a bizarre place. But that's how that works. So there's 538 electors. And what these electors do, these electors actually elect the president. All right. So to clarify, the electors elect the president. This is confusing. Let me take my sip of water here, because this takes a little bit to explain. Yeah, there is a belief that when we go to vote, we're voting for the president. Now, I don't want to shatter anybody's dreams, and I'm glad I started this at 8 o'clock because everybody's done voting already, and you probably already voted for president. But your vote for president doesn't go directly to the president. It takes a bit of time. It takes some counting and some other things. I'm going to explain the whole system here in a bit and try to get an understanding of how this system works. But yeah, your vote for president isn't directly to the president. So let's figure this out. But first, let's break this down for a second. In order to win, the person needs to earn 270. Now, 538 is an even number, so it can actually be divided equally in half into 269 votes. We have a potential situation every election that the 2 candidates can earn an equal number of Electoral College votes and become it becomes a tie. I'm getting distracted. I see some questions over here. But if it's a tie, then there are tiebreakers, and we'll get to that in just a second. I'm gonna click over here and see what's happening on the Facebook. Oh, so Curran asks, do I think DC should be a state? No, that is a constitutional impossibility. This is the way I read the Constitution, that where it says again in Article 1, Section 8, towards the bottom of the list of powers, that it by cession of particular states and the acceptance of Congress. Yeah, I'm gonna back that off. I don't know that it's a constitutional impossibility. It just says that Washington D.C. has to separate. But we oftentimes talk about the intent of the Constitution, but it seems to me there that the intent was that the District of Columbia would not be in a state, much less a state itself. So I'm going to try to keep this from being too opinionated or partisan, but you can see where that is. There is a debate out there about DC statehood. I think Congress would have to pass an act. It doesn't explicitly state that it cannot become a state, and that's how I was reading it, but it doesn't say that. It doesn't matter what I think. That's my answer for that one directly. So let's look at this. In order to win the presidency, the candidate will need to earn 270. That's the magic number. We're going to look at the 2016 election in just a second and get an idea of how that happened and how Donald Trump got to that number 270. How this works, so for each state, let's take Missouri. I'm in Missouri. Missouri has 2 senators plus 8 representatives. We're not that big a state, a little on the small side. So that's Missouri. So Missouri has 10. Every state has 2. Let's take a smaller state. We'll take a state with just 1 representative. This will be Wyoming. Wyoming is our smallest state with a population less than 600,000 people. I'm going to round up to 600,000 people because my brain works better there. So they get 3 Electoral College votes in Wyoming. And then let's take the largest state. That's California. All right, so California has 53 representatives. And so that's 55 Electoral College points for California. Each state comes up with its own, based on the Senate and the population. So the number here is based on the population. Now, our House of Representatives is limited to 435. The Senate's going to be 2 per state every time per state. And so this does lead to a little bit of a peculiarity. There is kind of a funky little historical leftover bit with the Senate here that shows up. So Wyoming, I'm going to round up, has 600,000 people in it for their 3 Electoral College votes. And then California has about 40 million people in it. And so what happens with this number in the Electoral College, it does become a bit weird if we kind of ratio this out and just divide. There's 3 for 600,000, which in theory would be like 1 for 200,000. And then in California, you've got 55 for 40 million, which is about 1 for every 700,000 people. So there is this strange numerical thing that's happening here. If the votes for president were supposed to be representative of the people, but I think that we would have to argue in this case that they're not representative of the people, and that's by design. The Electoral College was designed to benefit smaller states. If you think about what was happening at the time in 1787, when the Constitution was written, the smaller states were really concerned about the power of larger states, particularly Virginia. Virginia had a slave population that was almost larger than the free population of the next largest state, and definitely was larger than the slave population was larger than a lot of the other states. About 400,000 people and maybe 450,000 people in Virginia in 1787. And states like on the smaller side, like New Jersey, were rocking about 120,000 people in them. So they were really there was really some fear that Virginia and New York were just going to take over, and if they had all the power, then they would vote out the interests of smaller states like Delaware and Connecticut and New Jersey even. So at the time, the system made sense. James Madison actually presented an idea that both houses in the Congress would have a proportional representation, like our House of Representatives has a proportional representation, which means that it is based on the number of people that live in the state. But I don't want to get too bogged down in this and lose sight of the Electoral College. But just to point out, there are some peculiarities there. I don't think it's going to change. And in some ways, the Electoral College kind of makes it fun and interesting to have these debates. Though, if you live in California, your vote for president is significantly less powerful than a person who lives in Wyoming. Solution? Move to Wyoming. And I think people are. There's like a big move for people to go to like South Dakota or something. Anyways, back to it. So every state then, let's go to our map of America. Every state is given a certain amount, or they earn, I don't know, I guess they earn it. They're given 2. Everybody gets 2, and then they earn based on how many people live in their state. So Missouri is here. Missouri has its 10 votes. California over here, it's got its 55. And then a whole bunch of 3s. There's Montana, there's Wyoming, a whole bunch of 3s happening. And so the population density of these states is very much different. You got high population densities in California, but in Missouri, you've got a situation where we're not so populated. Our neighbor to the east, Illinois, I am fairly certain, though we'll check and we'll see a map in just a second to verify this, has 20 points. And so when you look at the map, you see that, these are kind of spread out. Our western states are going to have smaller populations. They're going to be worth fewer points. They're more rural. And so when we look at our map, those rural areas do tend to go more Republican. You do have some toss-up states that are bigger, but your larger, Illinois will tend to go to the Democrats. California will be safe for the Democrats. Historically, that's not going to change. Within this, though, so how do we think about doing this? If you're a political strategist, if you're on Donald Trump's team or you're on Joe Biden's team, some of these states are worth more points. So you'd think, spend a lot of time in California because that's worth 55 points. And why isn't Donald Trump trying to win California? Well, it's just not worth the effort to spend the time in California for Donald Trump because the likelihood of the Republicans in that state outnumbering the Democrats in that state is small. So it's not worth his time. So what they try to do is find states that are worth more points that have the potential to go either way. These are sometimes called swing states, battleground states. We got different names for these, but we'll look at the 2016 election in a second, but Florida has a tendency to be that. Some of our viewers will remember the 2000 election where Florida, they were counting the hanging Chad and it lasted for 36 or 37 days. We didn't know who the president was, and Florida could go either way. You got other states, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, that could go either way. Missouri used to be a bellwether state. It used to vote for the winning president up until the mid-1900s, and there was a change there that we don't, it'd be on the scope of this particular video. So what we want to do is try to understand how this Electoral College system is working then. It's based on points, and so let's look at the 2016 election results. I'm going to try to do this here, kind of be fancy with some scribbling. So you've got these states that went red. So how do I draw? There we go. I'm a professional. So Wisconsin, Michigan, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. Oh, and Florida is on our. This is for 2016. So this is historic records. These 5 states went to Donald Trump. He did a good job in Wisconsin and Michigan, where Clinton really did a horrible job. She, I think, assumed too much, and Donald Trump is a very intelligent campaigner, knows exactly what he's doing, and won these 2 states here. And they are battlegrounds again in this election. So let's look at a few things. First of all, Clinton 242, and Trump 296. And again, the number to win is 270. So if we look at this, all Clinton needed to get to 270 is 28 votes. That is just Florida. Okay, so that's how close these elections can be. And then it's any combination of Wisconsin, Michigan, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. So that's what, when you turn back on the news, they're going to be focusing on Wisconsin, Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania to see if any of those will flip. And so you'll talk about flipping. And it is an interesting idea with this point system that kind of works out the elections. I like the idea. It's like a game board. Every candidate's going to start with some. I think they already give Massachusetts to Joe Biden, but it's a fairly liberal state. So some of them they start with some states in their pockets. Kentucky, I think, had gone to Trump already at the beginning. But we look at the idea behind the Electoral College. And one of the things to remember is, like, in the early elections, there was no popular election at all. And popular election, I mean the regular everyday people didn't go to the polls. It was actually these electors that are nominated by the states, and that's something that I've tried to look up how the electors are chosen. It's different for every state. They've got different rules. If it's Democratic electors or Republican electors, it's a complicated system. So I'm not going to get into that because it's beyond the Constitution. It helps to fill out some of the areas of the Constitution that they left to be a little bit more vague. But those electors won't actually vote until later. They don't have a vote. Our vote is determined by Congress to be the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November. Why is that the date they picked? I don't know. I think it has something to do with everybody having a sugar crash the day after Halloween. But the electors won't meet until the first Monday after the second Wednesday in December. So you don't technically have a constitutionally elected president until the electors cast their vote in December, and it is then counted by the House and the Senate after that. So we may know tonight who the projected winner of the election is, and we may not know, but our vote doesn't determine the winner of the election. All right, that again, I'm not bashing the election system. I'm not saying your vote doesn't count, but I want you to understand. Let's go back to our map board here. When I'm voting in Missouri, what I'm voting for is who is going to win my 10 points for my state. So I cast my vote for president. This is just for president. Everybody else, it just counts straight up. You just vote for your governor, it counts straight up. They just count the number and it goes. But they put this little kind of safety measure on the presidential election. So in Missouri, when I vote, it goes towards the 10 points. And whoever gets the most votes in Missouri wins the 10 points. It doesn't matter really how many people vote. If one person shows up and votes for one candidate, that candidate gets all 10 votes in Missouri. Now, that's going to lead to a peculiarity we'll talk about in just a second. But it's the same for Illinois, 20 points. Whoever wins the state of Illinois wins 20 points, and it goes to their total, and they move a little closer to 270. Some states, there's a few weirdos out there. Maine, for example, will allow their electoral college votes to be split. So they've got 4. If a candidate wins 75% of the vote, I don't know exactly what their state rules are if you have to be over 75, but they can split and they can give 3 votes to the candidate that earned the 75% of the vote, and they give 1 point to the candidate who only earned 25% of the vote. So they can split. I also do believe that Nebraska can split its electoral college points. That's a state law. The state decides that. In Missouri and all other 48 states, the whole award of points is given to the president, or actually the candidate that wins the state. They may or may not be the president. So in that case, my hypothetical situation leads to, like I said, a peculiarity in the system. You have a situation where 12 states, now this is just a hypothetical, because last time out in 2016, Trump wins the election but loses the popular vote. Now, how does that happen? Well, again, the popular vote is not a constitutional principle. We'll get into how the election actually happens constitutionally in just a second. But when you cast your vote, it goes towards the state and who the state electors are going to assign their points to. So if one person showed up in the right 12 states, and it's the biggest states, so Texas, California, if we go back to and look at our map here, Washington, Illinois, Michigan, New York, Pennsylvania, New Jersey has 14, 10 in Maryland, 16 in Georgia, 29. Now, this is totally hypothetical, but in 12 states, the 12 largest states, if one person hypothetically showed up, they would have 12 votes, but they would earn the necessary, I did the math here somewhere, 281 electoral college votes. They would become president. But that's 38 other states that are out there that still, even if one person showed up in those states, the total amount of points left over if you won the wrong states is only 251. So even if one person showed up in each of these states, you'd have this situation where the president lost the election 12 to 38. Let's make it more clear why you could win the Electoral College and lose the popular vote. Let's say 2 million people showed up in these 38 states. We'd have 72 million voters voting for the losing president and 12 voters voting for the winning president. Again, just trying to make a point. How could Donald Trump win the election and lose the popular vote? Is because the popular vote doesn't matter except in earning the points for your candidate for president in your state. Okay, and I'm trying to make that clear. Hopefully that's clear. Now I've got some questions here. I could pause and look at some questions. Let's see. High-tech graphics. Yeah, that's my board. That's a laminated board that's taped to a piece of cardboard. So if you're talking about my super awesome map, that's what that is. Used it for about 12 years. Do representatives or electoral college votes ever changed based on population changes? Yes. So that's a great question. We are in, and not just because that's my wife, but it was a great question anyways. The representatives do change every time we take a census. So the census can be found in Article 1, Section 2, the House of Representatives. That explains the constitutionality of the census, which happens every 10 years. And we just took that this year. Hopefully everybody got their census turned in, because it's super important for the reason of the number of representatives in our state and the number of electors that we get for the president. So it is super important that people fill out their census. And that census counts everybody. It doesn't count citizens. So every person, whether they can vote or not, doesn't matter. Your representatives are based on everyone that lives in your state. Originally, they only counted slaves as 3/5, but when they got rid of slavery, they got rid of that horrible system, the 3/5 compromise, as well. So we do change our representation. That is something that will happen in the next few years. The census is taken in 2020, and then it will be counted. And we'll start to see in 2011 those results, or 2021. Whoa, 2021. The results of those coming out, and then we'll start to see some changes to districts and the number of representatives probably in early 2022, because we'll need that information for how many representatives. See, Missouri actually lost a representative in the 2010 census. Not because our population decreased, but just because population is increasing in other states faster than it is in Missouri. So we went from 9 to 8, and we lost a vote there in the House of Representatives. So good question. Now back to the question of how can, or maybe the question is, how often has it happened that a president has won the election and lost the popular vote? Well, it's happened 5 times. I need to erase some of my numbers here. So it's happened 5 times. It happened early in 1824. Oh, I gotta let that dry, I guess. I need a hair dryer or something. I can just read these to you. 1824, John Quincy Adams became president. 1876, Rutherford B. Hayes lost the popular vote but won the election. 1888, Benjamin Harrison became president after losing the popular vote. And then in the most recent times, in recent memory, I remember these. Actually, my first election was 2000. Bush becomes president after losing the popular vote. And then last time, 2016, Trump becomes president after losing the popular vote. And so you'll see sometimes people look at these numbers, particularly the last 2, and it seems to be that Republicans are benefiting from the Electoral College system. I think that's an overstatement, though. I think that, or maybe a little simplistic of a view, because Democrats seem to be the ones that are pushing to get rid of the Electoral College. Now, pushing to get rid of, please understand, it's not going anywhere. All right, so it's kind of futile to even do that. We'll talk about that in just a second. How you would have to get rid of the Electoral College. It's not going to happen easily. But Republicans tend to think that the Electoral College helps them. But actually, it was Donald Trump that said it best, that he won playing playing the rules of the game, and he was absolutely right. He campaigned in the states he needed to campaign in, particularly Wisconsin and Michigan, Ohio and Pennsylvania. Those states, he did it. He played the game the way it was supposed to be played. The popular vote literally doesn't matter in this scheme, the way that we've got it set up. So he said it best: if they change the rules, then he would change the way he played the game. So I think if you just were to look at these elections in 2000 and 2016 and say, well, Democrats would have won if we didn't have the Electoral College, that would only be true if you did the election the same way with the Electoral College and then just yoinked it out from underneath them and said, aha, we changed the rules. So you can't do that. And I think that what would happen is that if we change the rules of the game, you play the game differently. Okay. And so I don't know that any party necessarily needs to support or defend the Electoral College based on whether or not they will win or lose. That seems to me to be a little bit simplistic. We need to look at the merits of what it is and say, is this the best way to elect a president? If it is, keep it. If it's not, get rid of it. Just because it's constitutional, just because it's legal, doesn't mean it's a good idea. Okay, smoking, for example, is legal. It doesn't make it a good idea. But look at it for its merits. Kale is legal. That doesn't make it a good idea. So I hope that explains the Electoral College in a broad sense as well. So I got on a couple more questions here. Oh yeah, okay. I can't keep up with all the comments. Yeah, I'm not saying who's gonna win, so that's a comment. You gotta go back and watch the beginning of the video. My job here is to explain the Constitution to the best of my abilities. I'm not a constitutional lawyer. I'm not a constitutional expert, except, you know, having read through it a bunch of times and read a few books and stuff and teaching classes. So, yeah, not going to project a winner. I'm gonna wait and see. We'll find out. And, you know, it's 4 years. After that, you get to do it again. We kind of think about it. You can think about this. My other government teacher at the high school, he said he thinks of the election as every 4 years getting to overthrow the government. So, you know, it's what happens. Let's look at the Constitution a little bit deeper and what it says on how the election process is actually going to happen. So this election process, it takes a lot, like, to kind of understand this. I am in Article 2 still, Section 1. This is like the third clause, and all of this that I'm about to read no longer applies because of an amendment. But I think it's important to see what happened, and then we can understand how and why they changed something. So the electors shall meet. Go to my wide angle view here so you can see I'm reading my Constitution. The electors shall meet in their respective states and vote by ballot for 2 persons. So the electors met like 1790 election. Well, 1788 would be the first presidential election, George Washington. So the electors met in their states, Virginia, New Jersey, whatever. And they voted for 2 persons, of whom at least one shall not be the inhabitant of the state. And they make a list of all the persons voted for. So each elector votes for 2 people, and they make a list of everybody voted for, and of the number of votes for each, which list they shall sign and send to the seat of government, directed to the president of the Senate. The president of the Senate, in the presence of the full Congress, open all the certificates, and the votes shall then be counted. Here's the problem that happened with this. The person having the greatest number of votes becomes the president. If such number may be a majority of the whole number of electors appointed, and if there be more than one who have such a majority and have an equal number of votes, then the House of Representatives immediately shall choose by ballot. So if there was a tie, they've got tiebreakers in there. Now that breaks ties for the president. So that's actually, since our Electoral College votes can wind up at 269 and 269 for each candidate, the House of Representatives breaks the tie for the president. So that's important to understand, that even if there's a tie in the Electoral College votes, we still have a way to handle that. It's not like, oh no, what do we do? You know, if it comes down to it, we flip a coin. This is America. We like peaceful transitions of power. Where was I? Okay, the fine, blah, 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 blah. But in choosing the president, the votes, skip some more of this. In every case, after the choice of the president, the person having the greatest number of votes of the electors, so the next greatest number of votes, becomes the vice president. That's where they went wrong. The top vote getter became the president, and the second place vote getter became the vice president. And what you had was a situation where the people that were president and vice president may not like each other. For example, the election of 1796. You had a situation where Adams and Jefferson and they were friends, but they were from two different political parties. They could be on the same ticket, so to speak. So that election, the election of 1800, go by, and the 12th Amendment is ratified, fixing this problem in 1804. So we got to go to our amendment packet. Again, if you are interested in this, you can find your Constitution online and look at it, but we got to look at the 12th Amendment. We'll spend a little time in the procedural meetings. So the question, the making an issue of votes counted after the deadline. There's an election day, but deadlines and elections are set by Congress. And then states actually have some power to do that as well. That's a bit beyond the scope of what I am able to do. So, but that's a big deal. I think again, it depends on if you think more votes are going to help you win an election, or if more votes are going to hurt you win an election. I think that's where it falls on whether or not you like the idea. This is America. We like democracy, but who votes and who gets to vote is always a question. Like we started out, we do deny certain people the right to vote, particularly people under the age of 18 are denied the right to vote. So, are people who are a bit tardy on their mail, should they be denied the right to vote? I think that's maybe the question that's being asked there. But I'm not real clear on what that is. Why are some making an issue of counted votes after the deadline? Well, and the other thing, like deadlines are deadlines. There was some question I heard about if it was postmarked by election day, like if you dropped it in the post office. That is for the courts to decide, not me. I'm just going to read these bits. Now, the 12th Amendment is actually rather lengthy, and again, it's not something that I'm going to read the whole thing to you here. But what it does is it basically separates out from that one list of people that in the original electors would send in one list of people, and they would have the top vote getter be president and the second vote getter be the vice president. What they do now is two separate ballots. Now, hang on. This is going to get a little confusing. So the electors have two separate ballots. They vote for president on one ballot, and then they vote for vice president on a separate ballot. And I don't know if an image or a visual aid would work more than me just waving my hands like a ninja or magician or something. But the electors are different than the popular vote. This is us. Oh, I gotta switch cameras. So I'm writing on the board and you can't see it. So the popular vote is us when we vote. And we do that in November. The electors are the special group of people that actually vote for the president. All right. So they do their voting in December. It is what I say it was. The first Monday after the second Wednesday in December. So it's like 6 weeks that they have to count up the popular votes and send those off to the electors who then do the voting. So in November, we vote in, so we could say them for the electors. We are not them. So when I say the electors, they have two separate ballots, and that separates out the issue. But in the 1820s, what happened, the first popular votes happened, again, popular vote is us. The first popular votes happened in the 1820s that allowed people to vote, and then so our vote informs the electors on how they should vote. And we really don't see electors doing something different than what the people said anyway. There was in 2016 this idea of rogue electors just going off and doing their own thing. That is going to be determined by individual state law. That is not a part of the Constitution, the U.S. Constitution. So outside the scope. But the 12th Amendment allows the situation like we know it, where the electors, have separate ballots for the president and vice president. What that allows us to do is to know who those candidates are. So when President Trump ran for election in 2016, he chose Mike Pence to be his running mate. So when we vote for the combination. But technically speaking, when the electors vote in mid-December, they will vote based on two separate ballots, but based on how the people of their state voted. Okay, complicated. I think one very small, insignificant reason to get rid of the Electoral College is it takes me a good 40 minutes to explain it. Whereas if we just we count them up and the winner gets it, that'd be way easier. But a small thing. This is so fun to explain. Okay, so that's the Electoral College system. The 12th Amendment is super important. I'm not going to dive too much into it, but we do have the House of Representatives is still breaking ties for the president, and the Senate breaks ties for the vice president. You could, in theory, I guess, if this winds up as a tie between Biden and Trump, you could, in theory, have the House of Representatives picking Biden as the president and the Senate picking, Biden's president, Mike Pence is the vice president. You could, it doesn't say you can't do that to my knowledge. So it just, wouldn't that be crazy? That would get right back to the first problem that we had that we tried to avoid, though. All right. The Congress may determine the time of choosing the electors and the day on which they shall give their votes, which day shall be the same throughout the United States. So that probably gets to the question of beyond the deadline. Again, something for the courts to decide. I don't want to have to think about that. It's too hard. Let's see. Who governs the electors? Can they change their vote from November to December? No. State law governs the electors. Some states require the electors to vote the same way the people did. Other states don't, but in most cases they always do. And please understand, the electors themselves also participate in the November election. So you've got a situation there where the electors they are a robot punching device. For that. Okay. So, I don't know where to go from here. Yeah, we vote today. We'll find out whenever. I hope that I explains the Electoral College system. It is a complicated system. But I think that I think it has worked. It's done its job. I did mention the reason why it wouldn't be changed. In order to amend the Constitution, let's go back to our map. In order to amend the Constitution, you have to get, just to propose an amendment to the Constitution, you need 2/3 of either both houses of Congress or state legislatures. That's 67%. That's not a super high, just that is a super high bar. But in order to ratify an amendment, you need 3/4 of either state legislatures or state conventions to ratify an amendment. So the only way to get rid of the Electoral College, if that's something that you would be interested in doing, again, not saying one way or another, but if you wanted to, you would have to you'd have to amend the Constitution, and you'd have to get what's 3/4 of 50? 37 states to agree to that. But the trouble is, if you remember in our example, the 12 largest states, there are 38 smaller states that exist. There are not enough states in order to do that, in order to amend the Constitution. So that's what I'm saying. The Electoral College is not going anywhere. You could have states start to modify the way they do it, like Maine and Nebraska, kind of do a proportional thing where the loser would still get the proportion of electoral college votes. That would be different. But like I said, that's probably not going anywhere. Had some questions come in. Take a look at these. The question, yeah, I don't know. This one says, so what happens if the candidate concedes the win based on the popular vote? Could they still win based on the electoral votes, or did they just give up? I would think that person shouldn't be our president anyways, if they don't understand the system and how it works. That's kind of a harsh answer, but I don't think any candidate would be conceding based on the popular vote. I would certainly hope not, because the popular vote really, literally does not matter for who our president is. It is just based on those electoral college votes. So no candidate with any number of functional interns would do that. And hopefully we see why that would happen, because like these numbers here, you could win 12 to 72 million. If one person showed up in the right 12 states and voted, no, not the same, if one person in each of the 12 states showed up, you could have a blowout. And so, yeah, I think that if they concede, once they concede, they have conceded. I don't know. That's a really interesting question. I don't have an answer to it. It's a little bit speculative. It's a little bit outside of my realm, but yeah, I'll consider that a little more. But I think that's it for the Electoral College. If you got more questions on it, just let me know. We're gonna switch to just kind of presidential powers. There was some question, like presidents in their campaigns, they claim to do a lot of things. So let's just look at Article 2. There is one thing more I wanted to talk about with this, and it deals with Inauguration Day. So there's a lot of talk and speculation out there about like, well, what happens if we don't know who the president is right away? Like, if we don't know tomorrow, or if we don't know tonight who the president is, did something go wrong? Well, the answer is no. It seems like there's going to be massive amounts of votes coming in. There is also some speculations. I don't know what to believe is true, and again, it's speculation. People say, well, Donald Trump hasn't said that he would accept the results of the election. I don't know that that's actually what he said. I just think he doesn't want to tell you, he's not thinking he's going to have to not accept he's going to win. That's how he's thinking. That's how he's projecting it. So that question aside, I can't speak for him, but let's just hold a hypothetical situation where any presidential candidates, the election has not been decided yet. In 2000, it went for 37 days, 37 days. That's a long time to wait. But we don't need a new president until January 20th. So, keep that in mind. Like, this can drag on and drag on and drag on until January 20th. Do we want that to happen? No. That would be horrible. Like, let's get this over with so that we can go back to just, being mean to each other on Facebook. But wait, that's what we do on Facebook all the time. So, okay, well, maybe we should be nice to each other on Facebook. But let's just say, in the worst case scenario, we've got two candidates. They are locked in. They tied at every point they can tie. The Supreme Court can't make a decision. And there are no coins left to just flip a coin. They're in a legal dispute of who should be. It's like the worst case scenario. And January 20th rolls around. Why do I say January 20th? Well, that's the 20th Amendment. That's 20th Amendment. The term of the president and vice president shall end at noon on January 20th. The end. So that will be the end of the presidential term, January 20th. So if in this case, Trump and Biden are locked in a legal dispute, no one can decide who's going to be the president. There actually is a solution for this. It comes in the not the 25th Amendment. It's in presidential succession. Actually, it's not. It's in a law. We've got presidential succession that if a president dies, the vice president, or resigns, the vice president can, they step up into that role. If both the president and the vice president are somehow incapacitated, removed from office, or in this case, our hypothetical situation, if we can't determine which candidate won the election by January 20th, it will be okay, because the law states that the Speaker of House, take another sip of water to slow down, that the Speaker of the House will become the president. And so in that case, whoever the Speaker of the House is, like right now it's Nancy Pelosi. So if Democrats hold on to the House of Representatives and she is voted back to be the Speaker of the House, then January 20th, if we can't determine who the president is, then the Speaker of the House would become the president. Potentially Nancy Pelosi could be a Republican Speaker of the House, but the Speaker of the House would become the president. We would not have a situation where we don't have a president. In fact, we had a situation where the president, Taylor, he delayed his inauguration by one day. The inauguration ceremony is not the inauguration. We watch it, we see it happening, but the inauguration is, as the 20th Amendment says, at noon on the 20th day of January. So that is when the presidential power switch happens automatically. There doesn't have to be a swearing in. If they don't swear in, and this is what happened back when Taylor delayed it, because I think it was on a Sunday and he was going to church honoring the Lord's Day. David Atchison actually served as president for a single day. He would have been the first Missouri president, but unfortunately we don't keep track of one-day presidents. So there are safety precautions put into place. We will not be without a president, as the 20th Amendment states. That date is set in stone. So that, I'm going to check the comments, questions, because I'm going to move on from the Electoral College and see, and then look at some more interesting bits about the president, and then probably wrap this up with just a kind of, what is this, election night discussion on the presidency in particular. Maybe might do a few things after that. We'll see how I'm feeling. And what the interest is. You can vote in the comments. How about that? I'm not even checking YouTube. I don't even know if anybody's watching on YouTube. Sorry, YouTube. Don't know you're there. But I still love you. So qualifications. The president, first of all, the president has executive power. So let's be clear that executive power is the power to enforce laws. It's not the power to write laws. Although several cases have overturned the Schechter Poultry Company case holding, and actually allows for a lot of regulations to be written within the executive branch, and that could be something that you like, or something you think is like, well, it's necessary, or something you hate. But that's executive power. The president enforces laws. Shouldn't be writing laws, according to the Constitution. So no person except a natural-born citizen, citizen of the United States at the time of the adoption of the Constitution. See, it was written in 1787, so none of them were natural-born citizens, because all of them were probably British when they were born. And so, but nowadays you have to be a natural-born citizen. Sorry, Arnold. Okay, Arnold is not a natural-born citizen. They shall be eligible to the office of president. Neither shall any person eligible who shall not be 35 years of age or older. So I could have run for president, 39 years old, could have done it. We've not had a president in office younger than 42 years. We have a couple 42-year-olds, but that is the youngest. And so what we're doing nowadays is going with the absolute oldest people we can find to be president. I guess younger people have different things to do. Let's go. Let's get some younger. Let's try to beat that 40 barrier. Okay, let's get somebody in there. Like, speaking to me, I could have done that, but now I can't be the youngest president because in 4 years I'd be 43. So, oh well, 35 plus years old, minimum requirement. 14 years in the U.S. They have to live in the U.S. for 14 years, and that's the third qualification. That's it. You got your own political qualifications that you think of, but there's no other constitutional qualifications. It's not hard to be the president. You just have to successfully live for 35 years. You have to successfully live in the United States for 14 consecutive years prior to that. And then having nothing to do with this one, you have to be born in the United States. So that's not hard. You don't have to really do anything except manage to survive for 35 years. But it's a lot harder, obviously. Need some name recognition, need some support, need some money. But those are the qualifications to be president. On Inauguration Day, I can mention this in Article 2, still Section 1. Before he enter on the execution of office, he shall take the following oath. I do solemnly swear that I will faithfully do 4 things. 1, execute the office of President of the United States, and will do my best, and will to the best of my ability preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution, okay, of the United States. And I do want to point out that presidents preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution. I'm a nitpicker on this, okay? I'm a textual originalist. And when presidents say that they have sworn an oath to protect the country, they have not done that, okay? That is not what they swore the oath to protect. They have sworn the oath to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution. I make a big deal about that. Because if you're preserving, protecting, and defending the Constitution, it will do its job to protect the country, but also protecting the rights of the people that are inside of it. There are some powers. You know, presidents don't have, despite what they may say, they're not going to be able to write laws. So anything that needs a law and they say, I will do this, I will do that, they can't say that really. Here's the things that they can say that they can do. The powers listed in Section 2, Commander-in-Chief of the military. So our president is the Commander-in-Chief of the military, but we've got this system of checks and balances that says that only Congress can declare war. However, Congress gave that power to the president back in 1964 with the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution. They did try to walk it back a little bit in 1973 with the War Powers Act, but that was horribly meek and mild. But the president can just send people in, and he could do it in he's got 60 days. He can send troops in for 60 days, and then he's got to he's got to tell Congress within 48 hours, 24 or 48 hours, you got to tell Congress, hey, I sent soldiers into this other country. And they're like, okay. And he's got 60 days, and there's a vote after 60 days. But he actually asked for a 30-day extension on our troops being somewhere. And Congress, by that time, the troops are there, and they spent a lot of money. And so it's very likely that Congress is just going to continue to have them there. We haven't declared war on a country since Japan in 1942. Or that was, the first one. Germany was after that. So, but we haven't declared war on anybody since 1942. We've been in other wars since then. Korea, Vietnam. We were in Grenada and Panama. I don't know if you knew that. Not for long. I mean, we just sent in some dudes. They killed some guys, and then they pulled them out. It's like the president can do that too. But Congress has given over a lot of power to the president. And that's a question of read the Constitution, see if you like that compared to what the Constitution says. You may not. Reprieves and pardons. Okay, we're seeing President Trump pardoning people. That is totally within his constitutional power. He can do that. There's no disputing the fact that the president can pardon people. You may like the people he's pardoning. You may not like the people he's pardoning. That's irrelevant because it is constitutional. You can decide whether you like those people or not. That's up to you. The president can make treaties. The check on this one, there's checks on all these. Reprieves and pardons don't work for the president. Reprieves and pardons don't work for impeachment. So if a person is impeached, they cannot be pardoned and put back into office. That would be a constitutional crisis, a big no-no, and not even allowed. So can't do pardons. In that regard, they can't do pardons. They can make treaties, but they need the consent of the Senate. 2/3 of the Senate agrees to treaties. Some treaties the president can pull out of without consent of the Congress. Like you can fire his officials without asking permission. So he can do that, but when he makes a treaty, when he appoints an official, he has to get permission for those guys in order to do that. The last one is recess appointments is the last power defined in Section 2, but they're temporary and end at the end of the next session. Section 3 gives us Section 3 gives us 6 duties of the president. The State of the Union address, is a duty. Every year that's not an inauguration year will be the State of the Union address. Happens late January. They can recommend legislation. They can't write legislation, but they can say, hey guys, this is what's happening over in the executive branch. We could really use some legislation that would help us out in this area. He can call or adjourn Congress. These are super exciting things, are they not? Can receive ambassadors and other ministers. He's like the chief diplomat of our country. Can execute laws. Why that's the 5th one out of the list, I'm not sure. That's like the thing he pledges an oath to do at the beginning, is to execute the laws. And also commission all officers. So if you're going to be a general, the president would do that for you. So the question on the Facebook page there: can the president, vice president switch after 8 years? The vice president can become the president. We've seen that. Well, actually, that's what Joe Biden is trying to do. He has served 4 years as the vice president. That does not count towards the total number of years spent as the president. However, Barack Obama, which ones are living still? Obviously, Trump is still living. Obama's still living. George W. Bush is still living. Bill Clinton is still living. So all of our 2-term presidents cannot serve anymore. So of that list, Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, actually all of them have served for 8 years. They have served their total limit. So they could not become vice president because the vice president is is second in line. So the vice president has to have the same qualifications in order to become president. So he could not serve as president if that was the case. So they wouldn't do that. Trump could not. Well, actually, he is running for his 4th term, but Barack Obama could not become Joe Biden's vice president. That would be illegal. If Trump were to lose this election, he would still have 4 years of eligibility left, and he could then potentially run in 2024. He could run again for president that year. We actually saw, I want to say it's Harrison. Harrison served between Cleveland. Yeah, so Cleveland served 2 non-consecutive terms at the end of the 1800s. And so the president can't serve. So, people were up in arms and concerned that President Obama was going to run for a 3rd term. He did not do that. We hear the same types of fears with President Trump, that he's going to run for a 3rd term. No, he's not. All right. Because he can't. If he did, that's when we worry about it. But he's not going to, because the 22nd Amendment actually is the amendment that sets the limit of the presidential terms to 2. 2-term 22 is how I remember that one. But that's it. The precedent was set by Washington. He served 2 terms, and then no other president served more than 2 terms up until Franklin Roosevelt. And Franklin Roosevelt, he had a couple different things, but really he kind of blamed it on, well, you don't want to switch presidents in the middle of a Great Depression. And then he's like, you don't want to switch presidents in the middle of a Great War. And that was his 3rd election. And then the 4th election, he's like, not the Great War, the Second World War. And so he ran and won a 4th term, but he died early in that 4th term. In that regard, a vice president that takes over for a president gets to serve the rest of the president's term. If it is less than 2 years, then that vice president's eligibility is still at 8 years. So the longest, hypothetically, that a president could serve is 10 years if, like, hypothetically, either of these guys get elected president and they serve 2 years into February of their second year, and their vice president takes over. That vice president could still run for 2 elections. However, if the president resigns or dies or whatever, and the vice president gets promoted and serves more than 2 years of the remaining term, then that counts as their first term. So that is just a little peculiarity with that number as well. Let's see. Anything else? Oh, we saw Section 4. If you're interested, I'm not going to go through all of this, but Article 2, Section 4 is disqualification. It does talk about in that the cases of impeachment for treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. We have had 3 presidents impeached. There have been other impeachment trials for different. You can impeach judges. You can impeach executive branch and judicial branch officials. So I'm kind of particular about this. If somebody wants to remove Pelosi from office, please don't say impeach Pelosi. That's not an originalist. What's the other one? I should have wrote it down. Interpretation of the Constitution. She would have to be removed through an ethics committee. But I get what the intent is, but like, as a government teacher, like, let's stop putting that out there. The other thing that is, again, you can want to remove her. That's fine, but don't use impeach. The other thing that I don't think is possible, I've seen this a couple times, it's the liberals' worst nightmare, is Democrats impeach Trump and Pence becomes president. Already I have to stop because impeach does not mean remove. This is a big deal for me. I'm a particularist, I think, when it comes to the Constitution, an actual originalist. When it says impeach does not mean removed. Impeach means bring charges against. So they're not saying they're removing him. The House doesn't have the power to remove a president. So there was some confusion there in the impeachment process from January and February, and I got super angry with the media in particular, how they tried to explain the situation. But the process is actually fairly simple. The House works as a grand jury. They're not doing anything to say he's guilty. They're just saying, is there enough evidence to charge him? And that's all that they do. They're not saying he's guilty of anything. And so the House did that, and then the Senate does their job. The Senate operates as a jury in that situation, and the Senate actually hears all the evidence and witnesses. And that's what happened. And there was some cry about not enough due process and stuff. And I think that was either motivated by not wanting people to understand the actual process, or it was motivated by just people not understanding the process. But the process is there. Now, I'm not saying, was that impeachment politically motivated? Yeah, I think so. It totally looked that way. I think everybody voted in a politically motivated way. So I'm not saying, that's not what I'm saying about due process. I'm just saying there is a process. It's set up in the Constitution, and they followed that process. Whether you like it or not, like, you can hate it and think it's stupid, but that they impeached him, that's fine. But just understand that, like, they did it the way the Constitution said. This is probably gonna be the most contentious part, because everybody got super either excited or upset by this. But the way the Constitution reads, there's just a process. I'm just saying that the House did its job to bring charges, and the Senate did its job in either convicting or acquitting, and they acquitted him. They said, you didn't do anything wrong, and that's the result of it. Like, the Senate said he didn't, so he didn't. We don't get to sit out here and judge whether he did or did not do something wrong. We don't have a lot of evidence. I have never met Donald Trump and have never been to Russia. What do I know? So please understand what I'm saying there. But impeachment, we've had 3 presidents impeached. They've not ever been removed. We've never removed a president. So impeachment cannot mean removal. It cannot mean removal. Impeachment means accused of wrongdoing. Then they have a trial to see if he did something wrong. So that, I think that's what I'm saying about the Trump impeachment. It followed that very general process. We get into details later, but actually, I'm not going to. It's over, and he was not guilty, so he's still the president. That happened to Andrew Johnson in the 1860s, maybe 1870s. I'm not sure exactly when his impeachment trial was, but he was the president after Lincoln. He was too nice to the Confederates as they were coming back into the Union. So that was politically motivated as well. And then also the politically motivated charges against Bill Clinton. Like, so let's not pretend like all impeachments of presidents have not been politically motivated. It's not like they've actually gone out and shot somebody and then they're impeached for doing that. Like, got them on film doing that. So I think that was Aaron Burr was the vice president and shot Alexander Hamilton, but not particular. Okay, so impeachment is kind of a big deal, but impeach does not mean remove. It means accused. I don't think I can say that enough times. I do get a little frustrated when it's like, I heard impeach Obama, impeach Obama, impeach Obama. And I heard impeach Trump, impeach Trump, impeach Trump. Like, both of those things are equally agitating to me because all you're saying is like, accuse them, accuse them, accuse them. It's like, okay, like, I get it, but let's use the words correctly. That, I think, is what I'm saying. All right, I'm moving on from this. This is not what I wanted to do. Okay, so that's disqualification. I think, I don't know, did anybody vote on whether or not I should keep going? No. It appears that people are still watching. I guess you vote with your feet. Is that right? I guess you vote with your feet. We see in our government, I'm going to wrap it up with just some general statements about the structure of our government. I'm not going to walk through the entire Constitution itself, because we do have, I'm looking up, my outline is on my phone. That was a big mistake. There are a couple things that I just want to make clear. About our government. We do have constitutional principles that exist within our government. There's some big ideas that we need to keep in mind when we're looking at a government. And so the first thing is the idea of federalism. And that's that we have a federal government and we got state governments. So that's one. It's kind of a horizontal separation. I actually I'll draw that up in a second. But then we'll talk about separation of powers versus checks and balances. Limited government and rule of law, and then popular sovereignty, and we'll wrap this thing up so it doesn't go all night. I have no idea. I was going to check what the election results are, but it'll work out. You wake up in the morning and we probably still won't know, and it'll work out because January 20th we'll have a president. All right, that's my prediction. Somebody said who will win? I don't know, but January 20th we'll find out. You could be under a rock until then. My chalk wall dry out over here because I can't draw on it until I get the chalk. I guess I can go up here. All right, so in federalism, we think about this as like a layer cake. Is that big enough? Yeah. And so you got this cake that exists. Put some flames on it. And we've got a level of government that's up here. That's the federal level of government. This is the higher level of government. This is the Washington, D.C., our congressmen going off and doing that. And it's the Supreme Court. It's all those levels of government. Article 4, though, gets into this. And I'm just going to put an S. The lower level of government is a state government. The states, and like in ours, in our state, we're voting for our governor. So a governor controls the state. And the federal government is over all of the states. And there's some interesting things. You'll read the Constitution. I do encourage you to go ahead and read it. It's only 4,554 words. It's not very long. My packet is 15 pages long, but I've got like charts in there for like our court system and stuff. So it's not very long. Read it. They come in like little tiny booklets that you can get for free. But we've got this strange issue where the United States are referred to as like these United States. So they're referred to in the plural. We don't do that anymore. We refer to it as the United States. And the reason is kind of after the Civil War, the federal government, that top layer of cake, kind of solidified the states as no longer individual countries that have formed this alliance and are working together. That was the initial start to our government. In 1781, when we were signed the treaty with Great Britain, we didn't have a government. It's like that was our government. So what do we do? And actually what we had was 13 separate colonies that became 13 separate states. We think of states today as like subdivisions of a federal government. That is not how they thought about states in 1776. They thought about the states as 13 independent countries. That is super important to understand because our understanding of this is different. It's like, well, why does the Senate have 2 votes? Well, because the states had interests. The original setup of the Senate was that the state legislatures would choose their 2 senators to go off to Washington, D.C., not to represent the people, but to represent the state governments. And so we've messed that up now with the incoming senators. The 17th Amendment says that the people will directly elect the senators. Well, now that doesn't really make sense because it's not population-based senators. It's still a holdover from the time when the states wanted to have an equal say in the Senate. But now we don't treat states that way anymore, but we still have this holdover of 2 senators per state. Now, that can't be changed by amendment. There's like 2 things in the Constitution that can't be changed by amendment. One of them is the continuance of the slave trade until 18. Oh goodness, 18. I'm gonna have to look. It's in Article 5. Provided that no amendment which may be made prior to the year 1808. Yeah, so 1808. You can't get rid of the slave trade by amendment before 1808, so that one doesn't matter anymore. And you can't take away a state's senators without letting them know, so or without their permission. So yeah, we're not changing the number of senators either. I'm not proposing that necessarily, but the 2 things you can't change. But states at the beginning were separate, and they had this first agreement that was the Articles of Confederation. Confederations in our country have been a horrible failure, abject, horrible, the worst. Combined, the 2 confederations that our states have tried have lasted a measly 16 years. Okay, so I think there's some confusion about the role of confederacies in America, but the Articles of Confederation was a treaty, basically a treaty between the 13 original states that was so weak and useless that basically was overthrown. Well, I say 16 years. I don't think that's right. Articles of Confederation were established in 1781, and we write the Constitution. It's ratified in 1788. So they only last 7 years there, give or take, a few months or whatever. So 7 years there, and then the 5 years in the, even 5 years in the Confederacy. What was it? 1861 to 1864. So 4 years of Confederacy. So 11 year,s So 11 years confederacies have lasted and have failed miserably throughout American history. So the Articles of Confederation. I'm getting too tired. It's like 9:30. I'm still talking. I need to quit. But that idea there of confederations of states, these states are coming together as separate entities to work together. That was a loose confederation under the Articles. They barely got along. James Madison came along. We need a strong federal government, a strong top layer of cake to control the states and make them work together. That is actually the first goal of the preamble. It says, we the people of the United States, in order to, 1, form a more perfect union. That's what the federal government was meant to do, is to make the states a more perfect union, to make them work together more. You can see that in Article 4 when you read it. It really just ties in all the states. It says, look, you got to work together. You got to trust other people, the other states, full faith and credit clause, privileges and immunities clause. It makes the states work together. Today, we think of the states as subdivisions of the greater federal government, kind of like we think of counties as opposed to a state, or like in a state, you have a state, and then counties are subdivisions of that. That's what these have become. So you've got governors that are over their states, and the states make decisions based on the. Wow, that was just supposed to be federalism. Yeah, sorry about that. That was a rambly answer that probably is going to get me in trouble. Sorry. I usually am in better control of my words. But then the other thing I wanted to mention, two ideas that are often confused with each other that I just want to be explicit about. You've got first, kind of that top layer of cake, if I were to draw that again here, you've got what we know as separation of powers, that we divide our government into three parts. That you've got a legislative branch, an executive branch, and a judicial branch. That's the separation of powers. That each one of those has individual powers that they're supposed to do. The legislative branch makes the laws. They write the laws out. There's the old, how I'm just a bill, only a bill. Schoolhouse Rock. They write the bill. Then it goes to the president to be signed into law. If it's signed into law, then the president's job is to enforce that law. And that's the job of the executive branch. The executive branch is the largest branch in our government. It is one person that's in charge of it, but it grew from three executive departments, War, Treasury, and State, to now 15. So we've got a huge executive branch. It's not just the federal government, but a huge executive branch. And then the third branch of government is the judicial branch, and they interpret the laws. So we have one branch that writes the laws, one that enforces the laws, and one that interprets the laws. And that is super important to keep in mind as we're looking at elections and we're deciding what to do with the people. It's easy to look at a president and to blame them for things that have gone wrong. It's easy to point at them as a cause of either good things or bad things. Economic issues, oftentimes presidents get blamed for those things that happen. I try to avoid that at all costs, whether good or bad. There's no knob of like economic power in the White House. Like, oh, let's have some good economy. Why would anybody turn that down? Their policies can affect it, but to say that it is just the president, I think is a little naive. We've got 535 members in the Congress, and they have the power to do a lot of stuff. And I think that this is probably a little preachy, but we need to keep in mind that those congressmen, we hold them accountable for what they're doing, or we're supposed to as the voters. So there's a lot of talk about term limits. There are no term limits now. So that's what primaries are for. Okay. Without term limits, they can run forever, but that's what primaries are for. And we get an opportunity to vote for that. But separation of powers, goodness sakes, I am getting too preachy. I got to quit. All I wanted to say was we separate the powers. Then on top of that, I'm going to stay focused. On top of the separation of powers, we add in a second thing. Once we separate the powers, then we can have the powers check each other. So the Congress can check the president with his appointments. They can override vetoes, but the president can check the legislature by vetoing bills. The power of judicial review is something that the judicial branch can use to overturn laws that don't fit with the Constitution. There's a whole bunch of checks and balances to keep the branches in line. And I think it's important, these two in particular, to understand our government was divided up. Like, not only did they divide it into three, but then they divided the legislature into two more houses. Why did they do that? Why would they separate all the powers out and then take the legislative power and separate it more? Had to be a reason for that. And so I think that the reason for that is they really didn't want our government to be a government that worked itself out of being its good form. And so that That's kind of the point of that. Our government is divided up to force people to come together to find an agreement for the best ways to do things. I unfortunately think, man, I'm getting preachy again. I'm gonna finish this thought and then I gotta sign off because this is where I'm gonna get in trouble. But we've got a society that is set up to divide us. So our government is designed, it is divided, and to force us to come together to find agreements. The Constitution was based on a whole bunch of compromises, and it's working. It's working really well. But we have a society that is driving people apart, and we see that, and it's not working. That we need to really find a way to come back together again. I don't know what it is. We could blame 24-hour news. We could blame social media. We could blame a lot of different things. Russia, involvement, whatever it is, we can blame. But we have a responsibility to try to come back together and understand that we are not our own enemies. That we need to look out for the best interests of a collective. And that's difficult. Me probably even saying this could get me into trouble because I think I'm cutting against the grain of, if you're on either side, you think your side is right. But our government was designed to have checks and balances between the branches, and we've got these political parties now that are not in the Constitution, but that doesn't really matter too much. They're not unconstitutional, but we got these political parties that are dividing us, and that happened right away. Washington was the only president that we can say didn't have a political party. But 8 years later, the second president was already a political party, and so we've seen nasty elections before. This is not even the nastiest election we've seen. It's weird because of COVID and everything else, but it's not the nastiest election. And so to just end this off with a word of hope, I do believe that the Constitution is designed to last through these problems that we're seeing. And so barring some kind of huge tragedy or massive overthrow, which I'm not predicting, I do predict that we will be fine, that we can get through this. So I don't know who watched this whole thing, but I have 15 minutes ago, somebody said, keep going. Am I putting you to sleep? It's almost time for bed. We expand the number of states. It is possible to expand the number of states. That's Article 4 is about the states. And in Article 4, it talks about new states in Section 3, that new states may be admitted by the Congress into this union. So it is legal to add new states. We started with 13. We've got 50. Puerto Rico is right on the cusp of becoming a state. All it would take is an act of Congress. Congress just has to pass the enabling act to allow Puerto Rico to become a state, and it would be that easy. We'd have 51 states. It would change some things. We'd have 102 senators. That would be different. We would also have 51 stars on the flag. So that is possible. There are some people who floated the idea of combining the two Dakotas, North and South Dakota. That is possible, but Congress can't do it by themselves. The congressmen in Bismarck and Pierre would all have to agree. So the states would have to agree to be joined together to keep it at 50 states. I say just go with 51. There's actually probably no one watching this remembers having 49 states. We added Alaska and Hawaii in the... Oh, I don't want to say that. There might be some people. We added them in the early 50s. But man, you were born in 51, you wouldn't remember there being 48 or 49 states because you would just be a baby. And those people are ripe old age of 69 years old, so I don't know how many 70-year-olds are on Facebook. I guess it's possible. Hope I didn't insult anyone, but yeah, we could definitely add. There was the one success out of the Articles of Confederation. That was the Northwest Ordinance that allowed states to come into the Union as equal partners. That was the most brilliant thing that came out of that. It was a Jefferson idea, but I mean, lots of people would agree to that. But if we look at the map, like what happens there, we get all these 50 states now, equal partners. None of them are colonies. And because we know what happens to colonies when America's involved, they riot and leave. So we didn't want any colonies. We wanted equal partners. And so that's why we developed this process. Well, I don't want to say process. There's not a process of becoming a state. But that's kind of the idea. So, all right, there's a lot more that could be said in terms of the Constitution, particularly Congress, but I think we'll save that. I think my plan is in 2 years we'll have the midterm elections, and we'll come back and we'll do another one of these. I've got 2 years to prepare. I'll see if I can't get some guests on too, and we'll talk more about the Congress. Oh, well, okay. I'm going to keep going. I don't know. Never stop. The reason why... All right, so Congress is set up. They got the House of Representatives. I'm going to erase this. And can I do the whole Constitution in one night? The Congress is set up that there is one legislative branch, but it's divided into the House and into the Senate. That's an L. Right. So the legislative branch is divided in the House and the Senate. The House is made up of 435 members. That was a 1929 law that limited it to 435, because the actual Constitution says that we should have one representative for every 30,000 people. That's in Article 1, Section 2. But if we did that, we would have about 11,000 members in the House of Representatives. And that would be like a small baseball stadium full of people trying to make decisions. So we capped it at 435 members. All of them serve 2-year terms, and they can all be replaced at the same time. So this year, we could replace the entire House of Representatives with new people. Will it happen? No. Could it happen? Yes. And they would all be replaced. But they did something different with the Senate. The Senate, see, because the House of Representatives is supposed to be like, that's the crazy ideas house. It was described by Washington to Jefferson as a steaming hot cup of tea. Okay, and I don't know who does this. That's the House of Representatives. But the Senate was described as the saucer. And so what you do is with this, somebody needs to try it. I'm sure it would work. Is you take your steaming hot cup of tea. Can I get that in my fingers? I can't figure out how it works. And you pour it out into your saucer. And it cools off in the saucer. So I guess reducing the volume and also spreading out the surface area will cool it off quicker. So all these crazy ideas are supposed to come from the House. So what's her name? The Cortez, Ocasio-Cortez. She had that Green New Deal idea out of the House of Representatives. That's fine. That's what it's meant to do. Okay, like you can hate it. That's okay. You can hate it. That's fine. And so it's a crazy idea, but the point of the two houses is that the Senate will cool that off. And they're going to be like, whoa, chill out. Get it? Hot, cold, yeah. So they say, chill out, and she chills out. And it doesn't get passed. All right, it's not something to necessarily freak out about, because the House is supposed to be coming up with all those crazy ideas. But the Senate, they serve 6-year terms. And so what they did at the beginning of this, back in 1788, the first year we would be doing elections. That doesn't even look like numbers. Yeah, this is the last point, and then I'm going to quit. In 1788, they took the senators and divided them into 3 classes. They all served 6-year terms, but the very first time they did this, the first class served 2 years, the second class served 4 years, and the third class served all 6 years. So what happened was, after that, we can only replace 1/3 of the senators every 2 years. So if you're in Missouri like I am, we don't have a senator that's up for election because it's not our turn. So if this was 2016, I'm just put 16. If that's 2016, that's when we elected Roy Blunt. If this is 2018, that's when we elected Josh Hawley. And this is 2020, that's when we elect nobody because it's not our turn. You'll also notice that Missouri has, I don't know if they're actually first class or second, it doesn't matter. Well, we got one senator in this year and we got one senator in this year. So we never have a state that's replacing both of their senators. And that's important to understand. Why can the Senate not change as radically as the House of Representatives? Because the framers of the Constitution thought that would be a bad idea. So this election cycle, you're stuck with like 40 some of each. No, that can't be right. 30 some of each class. And I don't know what the breakdown is, Republican to Senate, Republican to Democrat, but you have a breakdown. And then Missouri has no vote for senator, but in 2022, we will, because Roy Blunt's term will be over in 2022. So that's a pretty cool feature. I guess a lot of people don't know about that. That probably should have went a little closer to the front of this video, because that is pretty important to understand in this election, because everybody's looking at these election results saying, well, what's going to happen? And then there might be the question of like, well, why don't I get to vote for my senators? Well, they serve 6-year terms and they're staggered. So one of those cycles you won't get to watch or get to vote on them. So, all right. Well, that is it for me. I hope you all enjoyed it. Hope this was better than CNN. That was my point. Better than CNN. Better than Fox News. Better than MSNBC. But appreciate y'all hanging out. Those of you who did. Don't know if anybody stayed the whole time. Some of those names have been on here the whole time. But that's pretty awesome. So thank you all so much for watching. We'll see you later.